Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Crew Travel Vlogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I am your host. And once again, Lee Harris from Blue Marine Travel. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thanks, Ria. It's good to see you once more.
Well, this seems to be a weekly occurrence. We got to stop meeting this way.
The wife's going to start talking, I think.
I know, right? Well, you know what? It's been a slow week in travel this week. And I think that's probably a good thing because we've had so much excitement. I'm not sure if excitement's the right word, but we've had so much going on over the past 7 months or so. And it seems like things are starting to just sort of calm down a wee bit and we're able to sort of catch our breath.
It has this week, yeah. I say with everything crossed. It's 1 week. Let's hope it's the start of things to come. But yeah, in general terms, it's been a lot quieter this week with regards to travel updates. So we're going to take it as a positive anyway, and then we'll see where we are next week.
Yes, well, I guess we should knock on wood on that one, right?
Yeah.
Always top of the list, South Africa. What's going on there?
Yeah, so just quickly to start the show with an update on South Africa. Last week's show, we discussed that the Emirates flight into Durban was cancelled due to a disagreement between South African government officials and the airlines operating flights into the country, with the likelihood of further cancellations. The good news is shortly after the show aired last week, the disagreement was quickly ironed out and no further flights have been disrupted and or are likely to be disrupted going forward.
When we talk about South Africa, always closely followed is, of course, Australia, New Zealand. What's going on there this week?
Yeah, triangle of doom, aren't they? Or they seem to be anyway. Australia, pretty much the same as it's been for quite a while now. The government keep threatening to raise the passenger caps coming into the country. Unfortunately, still no sign of it as yet. They did raise them ever so slightly at the beginning of October, end of September, beginning of October, which we talked about on the show a couple of weeks ago. They've not risen since then. Flights incredibly difficult still to get hold of through October and the beginning of November. They do seem to be opening up a little bit after that period of time, but rest assured they're going to get busy again quite quickly. So with Australia, just re-emphasize the fact that if you're trying to get home any time before Christmas, your flights now. For New Zealand, they've put in place the voucher system. Again, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. At the moment in time, from the 5th of October through to the 3rd of November, it's a system in place, but there are exemptions to it. If you don't get the voucher, you can still board the flights after the 3rd of November. If you don't get your voucher before you get to check in for your quarantine place, you will be denied boarding. So that's really important to remember as from the 3rd of November. Since the voucher system's been rolled out, we have seen that flights into New Zealand also are now getting incredibly tough to get hold of. So the same as Australia, if you are looking to travel home to New Zealand before Christmas, get your flights booked up as quickly as possible.
It's crazy how we're already talking about that now. But, I guess in we've always talked about prices rising, not the fact that it's going to be impossible to get where you want to go.
Yeah, that's unfortunately that's the situation we're in at the moment. I mean, Australian fare, you're lucky if you're getting cheap fares into Australia, man, because the seats are so difficult to get hold of. New Zealand's only going to go the same way, I think. Looking at Qatar Airlines, they look like they've withdrawn their flights into New Zealand at the moment. Whether that's just until they can get their head around this whole voucher system and how many people they can let on the flight, we're not quite sure at this time. But yeah, for sure, if you leave it too late, you're going to struggle to get a place. And if you do get a place, you're going to be paying a premium to get the flight home.
Well, and I think a lot of crew, considering the nature of the business, they're willing to pay that premium price just to be able to see their loved ones for that one time a year.
Indeed, and the fact is also with Australia and New Zealand as well, they're also going to, it sounds awful, but they're going to have to take into consideration the fact that they'll have to pay for their quarantine as well. That's going to go on top. So, it's an expensive time for crew to travel home, especially on top of the holidays as they come up quite quickly. But unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast at the moment.
Well, yeah, that is something to consider because, they might not have a month off. They might only have a couple of weeks and that couple of weeks is going to be spent in quarantine.
Exactly right. Yep, exactly right. You can try for an exempt. I know New Zealand, they do have certain exemptions to the quarantine, but in all honesty, I don't know any crew that have successfully got the exemption as of yet. So you are going to have to factor that 2 weeks into your holiday as well.
What a shame. Now, there is some good news. Countries are reopening borders. Which countries are these? reopening borders as a whole or to specific areas?
Yeah, so this week there's been three that have announced that they're reopening their borders, which is good. The first one is Japan. So after months of severe travel restrictions, Japan is about to open its borders for some international travel from the start of November. There's 12 countries for which the ban on travel will be eased, and these include China, Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Vietnam, South Korea, and Malaysia. Furthermore, the Japanese government have decided to exempt citizens and foreign nationals with residency permits from the 14-day self-isolation rule when returning from a business trip or working abroad. So this is good news for any Japanese crew who need to get home. They won't have to do the 14-day self-isolation. The conditions for the exemptions are that they submit a detailed action plan for their whereabouts and refrain from using public transport.
Well, that's good news because it sounds like governments across the face of the planet are realizing that there are a lot of people that it is essential they travel for business, and there is no way that they have the time to self-quarantine when they get back from that business because they might have a week before they have to do another business trip. So we become, one world essentially where there is no borders per se, and we're used to doing business straight across the face of the planet as and when we need. So that is important to see that governments are starting to realize that.
Yeah, that is for definite. In Japan, they seem to have taken a pragmatic approach to it, and they've realised that people need to travel. It's what the world is nowadays. People need to get from A to B. Yeah, and they can't sit there for 14 days self-isolating because within that 14-day period, they may need to get off and go out again. So, good on Japan. They look like they've taken a pragmatic approach, and let's hope it works.
Well, let's hope other countries start following that lead. That would be very nice to see.
Yeah, fingers crossed. So the second country we're going to talk about as well, Morocco. They've reopened their borders for international travellers this week, also to 67 countries, also including the United States. So good news for anybody from the United States looking to travel. That's another country open to you guys. Royal Air Morocco, the national airline, advised nationals of visa-exempt countries with an invitation from a Moroccan company or a confirmed hotel reservation for the entire stay can now have access to their flights to Morocco. All foreign visitors must comply with the health measures issued by the Moroccan authorities, in particular the obligation to carry out the required tests for COVID-19 no more than 72 hours before departure, and also making sure they wear a face mask in public areas. The business travellers and visitors from the following 67 visa-exempt countries who have confirmed hotel reservations can travel. These are all of the European Union members, the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand.
Wow, that's a big change.
Yeah, it's they've gone for a big time with the 67 countries they're allowing in. Especially with the United States as well, who are pretty much on everybody's hit list at the moment. But Morocco said no, provided you get your COVID test, you've got your face mask in a public area, then you're good to travel.
What's going on with Delta Airlines this week?
Yeah, so Delta Airlines, they've announced this week that they're going to continue to block the middle seat and limit the number of passengers on board their aircraft through to the January 6th, 2021. Delta have advised passengers travelling solo or with one other person will have a blocked seat next to them. For passengers travelling with two or more other people, the middle seat will be available if they prefer. So that allows, say, two parents to travel together with their child, or three friends will still be able to sit together.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's good news because I think, it's funny when we have all these 1.5 meters, 2 meters, the distances that everybody is saying in between. And then you all get onto an airplane. And not only when you're queuing up for that airplane, we all know what it's like to queue up to get our passports checked, et cetera, et cetera. And then sitting on the airplane where, I mean, in recent years, they've made it like a tin can for sardines, basically. So it's good to hear that Delta Airlines is taking that seriously.
Yeah, they have. They do really seem to have taken it quite seriously. They've put a whole other raft of measures in place as well on top of this, with regards to the cleaning of the aircraft, the ultraviolet cleaning. They're putting perspex glasses up in their check-in areas. So they do seem to really be taking it seriously. They've put the passenger welfare at the top of their list, which is really good to see.
Brilliant. Now, of course, what we always have at the end is crew questions. What's going on there?
Yeah, so we received a question this week in relation to whether there are any flights operating from Europe to Russia during October. The good news is that KLM do have flights operating on the 16th and the 18th of October from Amsterdam to Moscow and vice versa. It's known these flights are available to Russian nationals, permanent residents, and also non-Russian national ship's crew entering for work. All passengers must hold a COVID-19 PCR test, which is taken no more than 3 days prior to arrival in Russia, and the certificate must be in either English or Russian. And also, just one other point, furthermore, Russian seamen can transit via Amsterdam without a visa.
Wow, that's good. You know, one thing that really seems to catch me, and I'm always catching an eye or keeping an eye on all the cruise sites around the world, the difference in price for COVID testing is astronomical. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, there's no uniformed approach at all, is there? You know, you'll see some, some you think, oh yeah, quite cheap, and then others are just crazy, sky high prices. Yeah, but it's just I don't know why there's such a difference. You know, especially if you're talking about getting your test results, or within 3 days. It's not even like it's an express test where you're going to get it back in 15 minutes or anything like that. You know, who knows? No idea why there's such a disparity in the prices.
Well, and one of the things that I find highly ironic is in the US, where healthcare is astronomical, it seems that the COVID tests are the cheapest, whereas elsewhere, where healthcare is reasonable or free, that's where the tests are through the roof.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Actually, talking about US, I did see also this week that they've now announced that from New York airports, JFK and Newark Airport, they're now rolling out a system where people can get their test results back within 15 minutes before they take a flight. So they're hoping, if that's a success, they're going to roll it out to a further 20 airports within the US, again, which they're hoping will open up international travel. So fingers crossed that actually does come to fruition.
Well, and there are some airlines out there that are offering the test as part of the flight, as well as insurance as part of the flight.
Yeah, I know for sure Etihad now put that in as part of their, the airfare as such, a COVID test. I think we actually talked about this last week. So yeah, so it's I think it's looking positive. Fingers crossed. I say it with everything crossed. Touch wood, all the rest of it. It's definitely looking a lot more positive than what it did. There seems to be some sort of uniformed approach coming into play a little bit more now. I did also see that there was talk about the European airlines all coming together and having some uniform approach by November. It doesn't give them long because we're nearly there now. Let's just keep our fingers crossed. Hope that's the case, and then we can definitely see a lot more international travel coming up in the near future.
Well, I mean, it has been 7 months, and companies the size of these airlines, between you, me, and the fence post, well, and 1,000 crew, I can't understand why they didn't figure it out a heck of a lot sooner. But, on the ass end of things, at least they have started to figure it out, and they're going to try to make, the changes appropriate so that we all can just go about living our lives and doing what we have to do. Because there's only so long we can all sit back and wait. We've all got to get on with doing what we have to do because, the economies are suffering straight across the face of the planet.
Yeah, I think so. They were all slow. To be fair, they were all slow, in the uptake. It hit March time, for Europe and everywhere else. The airlines were slow to react for whatever reason that was, whether they didn't take it seriously in the first place or they thought it was a passing phase. Who knows? 7 months later, I think they've seen their profits have dwindled quite significantly, and they've realised that they've needed to put procedures in place. They now seem to be getting there, so fingers crossed. Hopefully, we'll get this uniformed approach, and we can get some kind of normality back anyway.
Well, next week, what I'd like to concentrate on is travel to the US for crew because the season is coming to an end in Europe. Now we're taking a look at Fort Lauderdale Boat Show. We're taking a look at crew normally this time of year wanting to go to the US to do dock walking or to find jobs. So next week, I think we'll try and concentrate on how crew can get in, if it's possible, that sort of idea, if you're up for that.
It sounds good to me. Yeah. Do you know what? We have lots of questions with regards to the US, so I think it makes perfect sense. And like you say, the season's now going to start up for the US and the Caribbean, so it makes perfect sense to definitely have a show next week on that.
Well, yeah, this week the PYA they just actually did a webinar on how to go to work in the Caribbean and the U.S. So it's a theme that's pretty much heading straight throughout the yachting industry. So let's go with it.
Let's do it. I mean, there are the US are the US. Let's be honest. Sometimes the decision making baffles everybody. So there are some inconsistencies, but we can talk about that. Yeah, we can touch on the US. Definitely, definitely, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Lee, once again, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on board.
It's always a pleasure, Ria. Lovely to speak to you once again.
I know. Um, Excellent. Well, once again, you have been watching Lee Harris from Blue Marine Travel for all your crew travel needs. We will supply the website underneath this interview if you would like to contact them. And honestly, I would suggest contacting them if there's any flight, and especially anywhere near South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. Those are three hotbeds that I would definitely contact them for at this stage. You have been watching another edition of Yacht Crew Travel right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I have been your host. Tune in again for another episode.